Welcome to the Total Health Podcast, brought to you by Total Health Nutrition Center of Menominee Falls and New Berlin, Wisconsin. Join Total Health founder Marty Johnson and his guests as they discuss some of the most prolific topics in natural health. Listen now as him and his guests talk about how to take back your health naturally.
Well, hello. It's great to be talking with you about brain health today and how that relates to, or as it relates to, processed carbohydrates or grains and sugars. So I'd like to talk to you about the effects of these things and how it can lead to deterioration of brain health. The brain actually makes insulin, and this is a very new finding, and it's kind of a unique finding. Any excess circulating insulin in our system can be damaging to the brain. So there's this enzyme called Insulin Degradation enzyme, IDE, that does two different things, but only one or the other at a time. One of them is that it breaks down insulin and clears it out of the brain, which is a very important thing. And the other thing that this enzyme does is it breaks down amyloid plaque deposits in the brain. So with that being said, when we have insulin levels that are constantly high in the body due to eating carbohydrates and sugars that will raise insulin levels, the removing of dangerous plaque in the brain actually is kind of put to the side, because this enzyme is too busy trying to clear insulin. So therefore, the plaque can continue to build up in the brain. And this is actually what is called by experts type 3 diabetes. I'm sure you've heard of type 2 diabetes. So this effect on the brain from high insulin levels is called type 3 diabetes. So high blood sugar usually accompanies high insulin and high insulin levels when one is insulin resistant, and that's type 2 diabetes. So insulin resistance is kind of leads to this type 2 diabetes. And really, the hormone insulin helps control the amount of sugar or glucose in the blood. With insulin resistance, the body's cells don't respond normally to insulin. So glucose can't enter the cells as easily, so it builds up in the blood. And this can eventually lead to what I was talking about, the type 2 diabetes. So I'm just kind of explaining how that all works. So high blood sugar also can damage the brain in two different ways. So it can cause what's called free radical production. And free radicals are basically unstable atoms that can damage cells, causing inflammation, leading to illness. Brain plaque formation, as well as pancreatic plaque. So these free radicals that can get into the body and into the brain are actually very inflammatory. And really, glucose metabolism produces an estimated 6 to 50 times as many free radicals as fat metabolism. So high glucose or blood sugar levels cause these free radicals at a much more higher rate than what fat does in the body when you're burning fat as energy. Okay, and the ideal situation for a person is to actually become more of a fat burner for your energy source versus a glucose burner. When your body has to burn glucose as its major energy source, the glucose is a very inefficient energy source. And it creates a lot of this free radical activity, whereas when you burn fat as your main source, or your cells burn fat, it's much cleaner, and it doesn't produce as much of that inflammatory free radical. The other thing that high blood sugar and insulin swings can do, so in other words, having highs and lows in your blood sugar and insulin, it actually when you have these like glucose drops or blood sugar drops, the low after every high drops the brain energy and lowers our blood-brain barrier defenses. So you have what's called a blood-brain barrier. So there's blood vessels that actually protect your brain from certain toxins getting into the brain, and that's how our bodies are made. And what can happen is these highs and lows with your blood sugar can actually start to compromise this blood-brain barrier, and it actually starts to really open you up to more toxins that can get into the brain and cause more inflammation and more damage. So, drops in brain energy also promote what are called excitotoxic brain cell damage and potential brain cell death, which would be more rapid aging of the brain, if you will. Excitotoxins, so once that blood-brain barrier is broken down, these excitotoxins, which are very specific toxins that actually affect the receptors on your cells. So it can actually affect how well your cells can communicate with each other, and that's called synaptic communication in the brain, and that's how your brain functions. So if those cell receptors are damaged from these toxins, then it can really affect your brain health as well. So every day, really scientifically, we're learning more about processed carbs, sugar intake, grains, processed oils, high insulin, and food toxins that literally destroy the brain and health. And we're really learning on how these things affect the brain. And it's not just about going paleo. So a lot of the big push right now, which is fine, it's good, but it's not just about going paleo or low carb or keto, all natural. It's really about focusing on going low insulin, and the rest falls in line. So what do I mean by that? Well, a paleo diet or a keto diet, which is basically taking out a lot of the grains and sugars out of the diet and eating more moderate proteins and fats for your energy source, those are all fine and they're good, and it will actually reduce the insulin level production in your body and the blood glucose. So absolutely, there's no problem with that, and there's a benefit in that. But what we can't forget is that there's so much more to fixing this problem. So if a person has gone, a good part of their life where their blood sugar might have been not in control and their insulin levels were not in control, then we have to go all the way to the cellular level and actually look at improving the health of the cells and the cell membranes. So getting in the right healthy fats, not just in the diet, but most likely even from a supplemental standpoint at this point, so that the inflammation on the actual cell wall can start to come down and we can repair the damage to that cell wall membrane. Because if your cell wall is inflamed or not as healthy, then the actual receptors on the cells aren't going to uptake the insulin as well and other hormones. So if this is going on, your blood levels of even your thyroid hormone like your T3 or the hormone leptin, which allows you to lose weight, or even vitamins and minerals, they're not going to be uptaked by the cell as well. So therefore, the body's not going to respond to those hormones or even produce enough energy or the proper energy. Your cells won't produce proper energy if the cells aren't receiving the nutrition like they should. So we have to look at the health of the cell wall and the cells in general that might have taken a beating over the years of eating processed foods and being exposed to different toxins and stress and so forth. So dietary change is important, of course, but going deeper and looking at the cell health is critical. And what we do in our office is we actually will do an actual urine test that will show us if the cell wall membrane is oxidizing, which tells us if that membrane is inflamed. So if it is oxidizing or inflamed, there's going to be a marker that shows up in an aldehyde chemical that will show up in your urine. And when we mix that with a lab vial, the agent in that lab vial will turn red. The more red it's turned, the more inflammation is going on that cell membrane. And this is 50 times more accurate than blood work to show us if your cells are compromised. And then we can go to work and actually correct the health of those cells by getting in the right therapeutic fats, as well as figuring out how to detoxify the body so that we can reduce toxic load that might be causing inflammation on that cell membrane, and furthermore, getting in the right nutrition or antioxidants to repair DNA and improve what's called mitochondrial function. And your mitochondria are within the cells that produce ATP, or your energy source. So adenine triphosphate, or ATP, is the end result of your cells producing energy, and that's what every living organism produces for energy. So all of that has to be looked at in the right manner to really, fully reverse some of these effects, and thus get the brain to function better by allowing that insulin degradation enzyme to go after the plaque in the brain versus just the insulin and so forth. So I hope this made sense. Obviously, brain health, dementia, Alzheimer's, all of these things can be a very, very big concern for people, and the dangerous plaques that can build up in the brain can really lead to these things, and that's why it's such an important thing to be looking at. So I hope that if you would like to get further help with some of these things, give us a call at 262-251-2929, or you can go on our website.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Total Health Podcast. If you're ready to take the next steps in taking back your health, please give our office a call at 262-251-2929 to claim your no-charge 15-minute phone consult to see what next steps could be. Also, if you'd like further information, please see us online at www.totalhealthinc.com. Thanks for listening.